misconception on that it's not.
Yeah, they don't get it. Yeah, let's talk through that too. Yeah, I talk to a lot of my clients about that kind of stuff too. So that'd be cool to rehash it with you.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Well, we're live here on Facebook here, Scott, and recording the episode in here. So, of course, you guys all know me. I'm Scott Royal Smith. I'm the owner of Royal Legal Solutions, the one-stop shop for everything tax, business, real estate related for investors all throughout the country and entrepreneurs. I'm here with Scott Maurer here today. He is an expert in how do you use your IRAs in a couple of really cool ways, guys. The number one way to use your IRA is going to be, of course, for the tax savings. Building that tax deferred wealth throughout your life means that you're getting double-digit extra returns because you just have more capital. You have more capital at play. That means you're going to be getting better returns. There's a couple of pieces you got to know about when you're looking at IRA investing, though, that kind of trip people up as we go down the road. One of the key things that trips people up is around taxation. When we talk about UBIT tax and UDFI, those are two big tax issues that happens along the ways if you don't manage things correctly, or if you don't know what the right things to invest in your IRA, you can be subject to these taxes. But I got to tell you, I have clients that have just said, hey, I'm happy to pay the taxes on it because the business is going to be so explosively great and I'm willing to do it anyway. And there's some cool stuff that Scott might be willing to share with us about how people use domestic and foreign blockers to be able to help avoid some of those taxes as well. The third major thing that I think we're going to hit on in today's episode is about how asset protection relates into your IRA. A lot of people think like, hey, nothing can happen that's bad in my IRA. I heard on this internet article that I read that everything I do in my IRA is protected. And that's not the case, right? There's some nuances to this issue that you need to know about that really come into play. But if you set things up correctly, you can minimize the risk to yourself and you can minimize the risk to your IRA for any of the investments that you're doing. And we'll jump into that too. So I'm really excited to have him on here to the show today, guys. These are the top questions that I get time and time again. Scott Maurer lives this stuff. So he's going to be able to chime in on that. So we also monitor the comments really heavy on all these videos. So if you guys have more questions that come up, feel free to drop a comment onto here. Share this with your real estate investing groups that you're a part of, and we'll give you that expert level advice just right here through Facebook. You don't even have to pick up the phone. You don't even have to do anything. We're going to be able to help you out in that way. So Scott, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. For everybody that doesn't know you and your background and the types of people that you help on a day-to-day basis, can you give us a little bit of background on that?
Sure. Yeah, Scott, thanks for having me on, and hopefully everybody will get some good answers today. What we do at Advanta, a little bit on my background, I'm actually an attorney by degree. I don't do any legal work for our clients, which is obviously important when we get into talking about that a little bit later. But my background, I've been with this company, Advanta IRA, since 2006, and the only thing we do is self-directed IRA administration and record keeping. So we help people anywhere from the mom and pop who worked at the school board for years and built up a 401k. They want to invest in real estate or private notes. We help those individuals all the way to companies that are looking to raise capital for their next offering, whether they're doing a private fund, whether that's a startup company that they just need cash to get going. We work with anyone and anyone in between, multifamily operators who are syndicating deals. So we help people, again, you have an IRA, you have an old 401k, you don't have to put that money into the stock market or into mutual funds or just stick it into bank CD because you're too afraid of the market. You can invest in alternative assets, and hopefully that's what we'll cover today.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a lot of people think that their IRAs are really restricted, and that they're used to getting charged, huge amounts of fees from the custodians, and they're used to custodians being a real pain in the ass to work with on getting actually deals done and taking forever for them to do that. And I know the kind of things that we're talking about today with using LLC structures that are owned by your IRAs are like some of the solutions that people have worked on to be able to help expedite what they do there. So. In a real sense, like once you set up, one of the IRAs and you're looking at a custodian to get with that, and you're going to do an IRA LLC, so you have checkbook control. What are the things that a checkbook control entity as part of your IRA gives you that you can't get any other way?
I think without a doubt, it's the flexibility and control. If you're buying properties at auctions, or let's say you're rehabbing a house, your IRA has bought a house, you're flipping it, you need to pay contractors. They show up in the morning, they do the work, and they want to be paid before they leave. As good as our services are to get checks out of your account, we're not going to be able to do it that fast. So we get checks cut in a day or two from getting a bill. But really, if you're buying property again at an auction, if you're doing deals, you need something where you need to be able to write that check right then and there. That's where the LLC, the checkbook LLC, is going to help you dramatically. Also, if you're someone who buys and sells a number of different assets, so let's say you are wholesaling a couple deals, you're doing a lot of quick turnaround private loans and mortgages, using an LLC is going to give you great control to do that, but it's also going to greatly reduce the administrative cost. We look at an LLC as simply one asset of your IRA account. There's one transaction for us putting the money into that account and just one asset that we're holding. Now, if you go and buy 3, 4, 10 different assets a year using your LLC, you're not going to incur any additional fees from the custodian. As I said, you're also going to have the ability to quickly turn around that money, put that money to use, write the check on the spot. If you bid at a property at 10 o'clock and need to pay by noon, that LLC is going to give you the ability to do that. Again, it's just not something that a custodian can do, because we have to have checks and balances for issuing money out of your account. But that checkbook LLC is going to give you that freedom and flexibility.
Now, I've heard some of my clients talk to me about like, hey, I'm kind of afraid to use a checkbook control LLC because, I'm not really exactly sure how clear the laws and rules are about what I can do and what I can't do for my IRA, and where the line is exactly is that. And sometimes what I'll tell them is like, if you want to do your flip in your house, you can do it. You can buy a flip. You just hire a general contractor. They go in, they manage everything for you. They're subcontracting it. You can even hire the subcontractors directly yourself. What you can't do is go in there and actually pick up a physical hammer. And that seems to be kind of like the analogy that we kind of use for that. Is that a good analogy, or is there a better analogy or a way that you guys use of explaining that?
No, Scott, that's exactly the same thing that we will tell people. It's the sweat equity. You can be involved in a project in deciding, who you're going to hire. If you're looking at a property to rehab, what are you going to do? What types of cabinets am I going to put in? What do I need to put on a new roof or not? But when it comes to actually, like I said, swinging the hammer, picking up the paintbrush, that's where you have to bring in a third party and get that work done. And, for even people who use the LLCs, we don't give legal advice and give legal direction to someone, but we can certainly answer questions. If you're, I'm doing this investment through my IRA account, or even I'm doing it through this LLC, just had a quick question. They can call us and we can go over pros and cons. Hey, you shouldn't do that, or what you're going to do sounds like that should be fine. So always give us a call anyway. But I would agree with you. It's the sweat equity really is the issue where you're going to get in trouble. But if you're hiring other people who are unrelated to you, and your IRA or your IRA LLC is paying them to do the work, that should be fine to do.
Very cool. Yeah, and I think this is where a lot of times where you find companies and attorneys working in synergy together. A lot of times the major providers that we work with on the custodian front of things are, there's limitations to what they can do from a legal perspective. And in fact, when I was down there at the big conventions for them, there's actually a lot of concern from the custodian aspect of like, what can we tell people? What can't we tell people? Into what goes in there, and they're very, very conservative on those fronts of what they can actually say in terms of advice with that. And so we get actually a lot of people that will come in for us to be like, from the custodians, they'll say, hey, you go talk to Scott. Because Scott actually can be a separate attorney. He can actually advise you, this is exactly what you can do and can't do. And that's the way that you guys that are here in the audience need to think about what these different roles are, right? When you're just doing something that's well inside of the box, that's where custodians are going to be like, yeah, that's cool. Go do that. You're going to be fine all day long doing that, right? Once you start getting near the edges and start asking really technical questions about things, that's when you'll actually need outside counsel to come in and be like, okay, this is specifically what you can do and not do in this particular context, because you're starting to get into a gray zone where we don't have clear case law, clear rulings, but you're not really technically in a bright line violation of the law. You're falling somewhere in between, right? And that's where great attorneys step in, right, to be able to say this is what happens there. So, so if you guys are wondering about like where do different roles fill in for what you're doing, it just gives you a little bit background on that. Of course, with using these IRA structures and these checkbook control structures is an awesome way to increase your returns, because you're saving so much money on taxes by having tax deferred money. Now your increases in revenue that you make are so much higher. And this is especially true in things if you're doing wholesaling through an IRA, because all of the wholesale dollars, all of the deal to put the deal together is all sweat equity, and you're allowed to do all of that piece. but all the gains that you make through wholesaling actually flow directly to your IRA because the IRA that's entering in the transaction. So you can make $15,000, $20,000 out of thin air doing wholesale deals in and out of your IRA and still be well inside of the rules. And I see a lot of people doing great work with that. And they use their LLC for that purpose because then they get to sign everything on behalf of their LLC. They can transact everything just like they would normally in their day-to-day environment. So when they hit a big win and it's going to be a ton of money and they don't need that money for their personal life, boom, they're shoveling that right through their IRA because they're like, that's going to my tax-free piggy bank. Now, I'm not paying a third of that to the government. I'm going to kick it over here and have that as part of my stack for my next deal. That leads me back to the next question, the next set that we're going to talk about here, Scott, which is about the taxation structures with UBIT and UDFI. And my understanding of that, well, in fact, let me let you explain that. In the big context, when do people have to start worrying about UBIT and UDFI taxation?
Yeah, generally there's two types of investments or two investments you're going to make in your IRA that are going to be subject to what's called unrelated debt financed income tax or UDFI or unrelated business income tax, UBIT. Two instances. One, if you use your IRA to purchase a piece of real estate using leverage, so you are buying a property subject to an existing mortgage or you're obtaining a non-recourse loan, your IRA makes a 30% down payment, you obtain a loan for the balance. Your IRA now will be subject to UDFI tax on some of the income that is returning to your IRA. It's a tax that the IRS has against IRAs to help keep the playing field a little bit level with people who aren't using retirement accounts. So that's one instance, your IRA is buying a property where there is leverage involved. Either you're buying it subject to or you obtain a new mortgage. So in my example, if you borrow 70% of the purchase price, your 70% of the income that returns to your IRA will be subject to that tax. The rest of it does come back tax-free, but that portion, whatever is related to your debt financing on the property, is going to be subject.
Do you know a ballpark about what that tax is?
Well, the tax rates, unfortunately, it's trust tax rates. So they ramp up very quickly. They top out at 39.6%, I think, after like 15 or 16,000 of income. So it's a very steep tax. Now, again, the important thing to remember is if you have a situation where UDFI or even UBIT applies, it does not make a transaction prohibited. That's a completely different discussion of, when you want to buy a property to live in or you want to lend money to a family member where you're not allowed to do it. The UDFI or UBIT just means you're going to have this tax implication for your IRA. Now, if you buy a property, a piece of real estate, all cash, and you're just doing a long-term rental, there's no leverage, there's no UDFI tax.
What about for people that are buying like a piece of real estate and they're running the property such that there's actually no income, there's no cash flow from it, and then they end up selling the piece of property, let's say at the end of like 10 years and have like a big gain that's resulted from it? Some people would say, hey, do I have to pay taxes on that from the finance perspective, or is that all tax-free because it's inside of my IRA?
Yeah, I mean, if you've bought the property all cash, at the end of the day, when you sell it, all of that profit comes back with no tax implication to the IRA account. It's when there's leverage involved, whether there's cash flow or not. So if I buy a property and I put 30% down and I try to sell it 5 years later, and at that point, the property is maybe 50% leveraged, because there's leverage still involved, I'm going to have that UDFI tax apply to the sale of the property as well. But again, This is a different discussion. If it's an all cash transaction, then you're not going to have that issue.
Yeah, all cash, there's no financing, no taxes. That's kind of coming out and play into that, right?
Yep.
So when do people run into the UBIT type issues?
Right. So UDFI, again, is leveraged purchases of real estate. UBIT, unrelated business income tax, is a tax I think that can be a little trickier and can catch people more by surprise. Because if you're buying a property with leverage, up front, hey, I'm going to have this tax is going to be applicable to what I'm doing. UBIT can occur when your IRA is engaged or is in receipt of business income. Now, rents from a piece of real estate, dividends that you get from a corporate stock, those are all passive income. That is not considered business activity. But if your IRA is invested, for instance, into a private partnership, let's say someone is starting a new restaurant in town and you're just one of the investors to help put capital towards that restaurant. If each month or each quarter they're sending you back a portion of business profits, that is your IRA in receipt of business income. And again, your IRA in that instance will be subject to this UBIT tax. And again, the reason for the tax is to level the playing field for, say, hey, restaurants formed with non-IRA funds are going to have a higher tax liability. So it's, again, doesn't mean it's prohibited. It just means you have to consider. And again, the problem with some of those investments, when you buy into a private partnership, you don't know if they're giving you dividends back at the end of the year, whether or not they're giving you business profits. And that's a discussion you need to have with the CPA or the tax advisor for the company that you're investing into. So again, that's one of the biggest areas that I think goes missed a lot of times when people are investing into a private deal.
So what's the best way that you find that somebody says, hey, there's this active business that's going on here and I want to make money off of that business? What's the best ways that you found them be able to minimize the taxes while still being able to participate?
I think potentially one of the simplest ways to do it for an individual is C corporations do not pay UBIT tax because the corporation pays it at the corporate level. So if you're looking at getting into a partnership where there's going to be considerable gains, either on an ongoing basis or maybe a stock sale later on, you could have your IRA form its own C corporation. The C corporation paying tax at I think 20% or so as the current corporate tax rate. Instead of paying tax at 39.6%, if you just did it directly in your IRA and have UBIT apply, instead, invest your IRA through a C Corp and let the C Corp pay 20% tax on the gains instead. And so you're going to save a little bit in taxes there. And I know that there's people have used other offshore entities as well. Sometimes partnerships are created so that there's a UBIT blocker in place where the investors using retirement funds are not subject to UBIT tax. But that's something, again, that's a deal by deal basis. And when you're looking over the paperwork for that investment, look for those different provisions in the document.
And so to come back, so there's two different things here that are going into play. We can typically say that we have an IRA that's owned by an LLC. The LLC would then if it makes an investment and say it owns 10% of an active running restaurant, you say definitely subject to UBIT. That's an active business. You own an equity stake in it, and it's going to be paying you out money on a quarterly basis because you're an equity owner in the company. But I think what I heard you say is, hey, instead of you have an IRA that's owning an LLC, maybe your IRA owns a C Corp, and then the C Corp makes the investment for you. And when the restaurant pays the C Corp then makes a dividend payment to the IRA. And it's not an equity payment to the IRA. It's actually a dividend from a C Corp, and that actually has a technical difference to the IRS. For some inexplicable reason, IRS has created a loophole for that and allows us to pay less taxes on that. Is that right?
That's correct. So yeah, and it could be an LLC tax as a C corporation. That's another important thing. So the taxation of the entity is important, but your IRA invests into that structure. The restaurant pays the C corporation. The C corporation then pays the corporate tax, but passes on dividends then to the IRA account, which owns that separate entity. So again, getting back to what I said a minute ago, dividends are tax-free passive income back to your IRA account. So the corporation's paying the tax rate up front. So you're gonna save some there. And again, that's up front, knowing that you're gonna have a significant gain in the account that you don't want subject to that 39.6%.
And Scott, have you seen many people that are clients of yours use these either domestic or foreign blockers? I know when you go offshore and you're doing foreign pieces, you have a little bit more leverage in being able to avoid some tax. Usually, like the costs of those are very high. So you have to make a big play for that to make any sense. But it's my understanding too that there's ways that people use domestic blockers that are a little bit more affordable, but maybe they're not quite as strong in terms of how well they hold up if they're challenged. Have you worked with people that are setting up those types of blocking entities and seeing how well they actually hold up if challenged?
Yeah, I haven't seen them tested. We've seen some people investing into some multifamily deals and syndications where when the multifamily syndicator put together the private placement, they put the UBIT blocker within their particular offering document. So it's not something. No, I haven't seen as many just directly with the IRA, but more so someone's investing into an entity where somebody else has put that in place. So it's definitely especially as IRAs people are becoming more aware that they can use their IRA to make these types of investments. That issue is obviously popping up more, and people are becoming more aware of it, and then hopefully protecting their investors from that.
And how does that work? Like, how does an entity actually structure something to have a UBIT, a blocker in place whenever they're creating their, it's basically like a syndication LLC or something like that, right? And they'll have a UBIT provision, UBIT blocker incorporated. How are they doing that?
and this is something I'm not as well versed on, but I believe it goes into whether or not your IRA is investing into either the debt of the company or your IRA is investing into the equity portion of the company. I believe that's how they structure. They kind of maybe have different types of interest. Some companies also, to get around UBIT, will structure investments in the company as notes to the, instead of being an actual equity owner in, say, the restaurant, your IRA is instead a lending money to the restaurant, and they're paying back interest on a loan. Again, interest income not subject to UBIT. So there's a couple different ways to do it, but I think that a lot of times they'll put in different classes of interest, and so your IRA is not investing in the interest that would incur UBIT tax.
Yeah, I think the way I've seen that happen before too is you get some really clever attorneys that come in there and they say, well, it's really interest income, and we're actually going to play higher rates of interest if the company does better, right? So tell me the difference between that and equity, right? But there's a technical difference to it, right? And the technicalities a lot of times are enough to hold up, to be able to stave off what's going on a lot of times with these IRS attacks. I think a lot of people don't understand the way that the mechanics of the way these getting attacked by IRS really work, because IRS is typically going after what is the fish that's the most common fish that they can target, where they can make the most amount of money. And the more difficult you make it and the more niche things that you build into what it is that you're doing, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily totally safe if ever challenged. What it means is you're really a pain in the ass to go after, and the pool that you're playing in is small enough that it's not a target. And that's really at the end of the day, that's really the nuts and bolts of how a lot of this works. And that's why having skilled attorneys in conjunction with really great custodians is how you're able to maximize returns. That's how professionals should be paying for themselves, is because they're able to guide you down that path to say, hey, we can structure it this way, and this is the nuances of this game, to be able to maximize the amount of money that you're making out of it. So the last thing to touch on today, Scott, from the agenda that we set in the beginning, was about how do we have asset protection inside of the IRAs? I think a lot of times people think like, hey, it's inside of my IRA, that's already asset protected, I don't need to do anything else with that. Where have you seen it blow up for people that thought they were protected, but it actually turns out that they weren't?
Well, luckily, I haven't seen it actually blow up on someone, but I have definitely had conversations with a lot of people who have that misconception. We're based in Florida, so a lot of our clients obviously are here in the state of Florida. Now, under Florida law, your IRA is protected from your personal creditors. And then usually every state has some level of protection for IRAs, some not as generous as Florida. But what that means is if I was personally sued, if I'm at fault in a car accident or someone's suing me for libel, they can't attach their judgment against me to my retirement account. Again, that's in Florida, and every state has a little bit different provision. Some people will say, okay, so my IRA is judgment proof. And what they're mistaking is, again, that's my personal creditor. Now, if my IRA owns real estate and someone slips and falls on that property, that injured party can sue my IRA as the owner, and that protection that people think of now going to apply for their IRA does not, because again, that protection is only from your personal creditors attaching a judgment to your IRA account, but it does not protect your IRA from its own creditors. So that's, again, why people who are largely concerned with this, that's a situation when forming an LLC or forming some type of private trust, putting in different things into place to help protect yourself. Because again, that's one of the biggest misnomers I think I've seen with people when it comes to liability, thinking that these state laws, oh, my IRA is protected because in Florida they can't touch my IRA. No, they can if it's your IRA owning real estate. So if you're for that reason, some people invest in notes and they don't want to hold the real estate title. But if you want to buy rentals, you want to buy rehabs, that's where using an LLC or trust is going to help protect you.
That's awesome. Can you elaborate a little bit more about how people are using trusts in conjunction with IRAs? Because I think that's something that I talk to people about, and they're like, I've never heard of this before. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, I mean, most people are familiar with trust in a general sense. A lot of people have revocable living trust, to help as an estate planning device. But using your IRA through a trust, you set up, again, it's a private document. You have a third party acting as your trustee. That's one difference between the LLC. You do need to have, in our estimation, a third party acting as trustee. But your IRA is the grantor of the trust. That's one of the parties in the trust that contributes the asset to that entity. So you name your IRA as a grantor, and your IRA is the beneficiary of the trust, because when the trust terminates, the assets are going to flow back to your IRA account as well. But then when you're buying property and you're buying real estate, rather than having it on title and on deed that it's Advanta IRA for benefit of John Smith's IRA account, it's Joe Blow as trustee of this certain either land trust or personal property trust, however you name it. So there's no indication on public record that you own it, that your IRA owns it. It's simply the name of a trustee. Now, I still don't know that the trust is going to have as much liability protection that an LLC typically has, but it does make it more difficult, not as attractive for a potential creditor to go after, because, again, an opposing attorney looking sees that there's a trustee involved. They don't even know who the actual owner of the property is. There may not be any real assets to go after. So again, it presents another hurdle for a potential creditor.
Yeah, so typically we refer to it when I talk to people about this. I haven't seen where trusts themselves, unless we're talking about like domestic asset protection trusts or formed underneath certain state statutes, that the trusts really provide much protection at all as common law trusts. A lot of times when attacked, they just collapse into wherever the grantor and beneficiary is, and they treat it just like the grantor and beneficiary. So when I talk to my clients about it, I typically refer to say, don't use these for asset protection, only use them for anonymity. Like you want to keep your name off a title to something, like this would be a trust would be the avenue to do it. Have you seen these common law types of trusts that are created for these purposes provide asset protection in certain circumstances?
No, I have not. And that's a good distinction to make. Again, it's somebody's, certain people, they're not as much, a lot of people do conflate anonymity with liability protection. They think if my name's not on the public record, I'm protected. That their fear is not of somebody actually slipping and falling on the property, but rather somebody going into the property records of a county, typing in their name, seeing that they own 10 properties, and then therefore trying to target them in a lawsuit as opposed to just an occurrence happening. So no, I haven't seen trusts act as a liability device. And in fact, when we do teach classes, we do like to make that distinction as well. It's anonymity from the trust owning an asset. But if you want true liability protection, you're going to have to look to some other structure to do it.
Have you ever recommended how people can do the asset protection and the anonymity inside of an IRA together?
Yeah, I mean, you could use an LLC that is owned by a trust and you can layer a couple of different things. We try not to get too much involved, again, in the legal side of saying this is how you should do it. We kind of will lay out the possibilities and hopefully put them in touch with someone like yourself who can then say, hey, if this is what you're trying to accomplish, these are the 2 or 3 different steps that you can take. But we certainly have had people do, multiple LLCs, all owned by through the IRA, naming other people as managers or officers in those deals, and certainly with the trust as well. Again, we leave that up to the attorney involved to really steer them the right way.
To go with that, yeah. So typically, what I'll see is like real estate investors is that the best asset protection you can get is going to be individual LLCs, one for each property. Or what I also see too is that people will use a series LLC structure and use it in a similar fashion. That has some cost savings and benefits to it. Although there's some financing restrictions because financing companies don't want to finance directly inside of a series LLC. They always want to use an LLC. And with IRAs, you have a diminished LTV that you can loan on. I think it's 70% for most lenders, like in that, right? There's one thing that I wanted to run with you here too before we wrap up, because I think we did a really good job today about saying, okay, here's the advantages of using your IRA. Here's the tax, pieces that you're going to need to know about. You can invest in all these different assets. You can't invest with certain people, and there's a couple of things that you can't buy with it. But for everything else out there, real estate and tons of other stuff, you can actually invest with. And there's ways to do it where the taxes that you think you might have, there's actually ways to avoid those taxes if you do it right. And what we just touched on here at the very end here was with the asset protection was saying, hey, you can use an LLC to have checkbook control. You can manage essentially all of the assets of your IRA yourself with all the ownership belonging to your IRA, or you can use a trust, which is really cool because you can have anonymity, and also trusts are essentially free to create and don't have any ongoing fees with them. So it's even a cost benefit for using those trusts. One distinction that I think is still up in the air a little bit with a lot of the attorneys that I talk to in the IRA trust and the IRA LLC field is about whether the trust can have the trustee being the client. And there's a split that I see from the guys that I talk to. One group says you can't do that, that's not proven, and it's really just you're going to be listed as, Scott Royal Smith, trustee of the Advanta IRA trust, putting in the property, and we think that's no good because now your name is there on title to the asset. The other split of attorneys that I talked to says, listen, you guys totally don't understand the way the law actually works here. You have an LLC and you have managers and you have members. The members of the LLC are the ones that own the LLC, and that's the IRA, and the manager is you. And we all said that's good for the LLC context. And in the trust context, you have a grantor and beneficiary. That's who owns the trust. And you have a trustee, which is just like the manager of the LLC. You guys are just getting caught up because a name is listed, but there's no legal difference. There's no legal theory that separates the two, and there's not any really good distinctions that are rendered down from IRS to actually tell us into that. Do you see that same type of split? And it sounds like you guys fall more on the side of the former, saying we don't want people listed as clients being listed as trustees of the trust.
Here, I'll give you an attorney answer on this one. So
okay.
From our company perspective, yes, because there's no case law like there is for the LLC supporting you to be the manager, we will insist on a third party acting as trustee unless you get an attorney to write an opinion letter that states it's okay for you to be the trustee. Now, on personal belief side, one other thing you didn't mention I was thinking of too, though, I can start my own 401k plan, like a solo 401k, and I can name myself as trustee of that plan, go get a bank account open at a local bank as trustee of my 401k plan. So I think there's a lot of analogies there, though, with if I can be the trustee of my 401k directly, why can't I be the trustee of an entity that my IRA owns? So
good point.
I think that's a situation where, again, my personal belief, I don't think the IRS would have an issue. I think they're much more concerned with what's going on inside of those entities, the actual investments, as opposed to the structure.
I think they're outcome based, aren't they? Like more often than not, they're outcome based. Like, oh, this is what we don't want. We didn't want that to happen.
Right.
Going to change the rules on the fly with it. About nope, that's the wrong result. So we're just going to change the rules.
Right.
That's not the result we really wanted for it. That's what I see more and more, from them.
Yep, I would agree.
Do you see a lot of the people that come in for, using IRAs? I see a lot of people that say, hey, should I do an IRA here? And I've actually just heard that the solo 401k is actually, better for me to use with that. And it's better than the IRAs in almost every respect because I don't have to worry about, certain things in there. And some people will even tell me, say like, well, I actually heard in the solo 401ks, I don't have to worry about UBIT and UDFI. It's just totally wide open on everything I can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think a solo K for a lot of people, if you are self-employed and you're going to have self-employment income of some kind, whether that's your main business as a sole proprietor or whether you have a side business, the ability to borrow from it, the fact that you don't have UDFI if you buy leveraged real estate. I do believe, though, that UBIT tax still applies if your 401k invests in somebody else's business, that your 401k is still subject to UBITs. That's one distinction. But the 401k has larger contribution limits. So we do have that discussion. I think the key thing, though, for people who are considering that, because I know it's a topic that is gaining a lot of popularity, to have a solo 401k, you have to have a business that you own. It's not a matter of simply just saying you do, but you never take a salary. You don't actually earn any income on this business. You want to just say you have it for the purposes of getting these other benefits that 401ks have. So the IRS, again, it would look at your 401k and say, okay, are you making annual contributions to your 401k account? Have you ever made contributions to the 401k account? So you do need to treat it as a legitimate entity. If you're going to do a 401k account or a solo 401k, make sure you at least contribute some money every now and then out of a salary or out of earnings that you have from your business into that 401k to legitimize it. I think that's the biggest concern I have with a lot of people running out and setting up solo Ks right now is, are they really eligible to even have a solo 401k? It's not just you decide on your own to do one and I'm going to have one. You need to have a business behind you. Again, doesn't have to be your main business, doesn't have to be a very profitable business. If you have you have to have something in order to bolster that case, though.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think they're like, oh, I'm going to start my own solo 401k with all of my W-2 income. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't do that. You need outside income to be able, you need your 1099 type income to bring in, and, that you otherwise have to report to be able to do the solo 401ks and have them make, any sense for you.
Correct.
To be able to do that. And again, this is, I think, where it comes in, where a lot of times like companies like ours actually have a ton of synergy, because the discussions that you can have with a major provider can be it can be limited to some extent. When you hire an attorney to come in that's from outside, that attorney represents you. Everything that's talked about is protected by the attorney-client privilege. It also means that you also have a lot more freedom in terms of exploration about like what can you do, like, and what would that look like, right? So we've actually had clients that say, hey, I really want to start this solo 401k, and I want to be able to take advantage of that. And I work with them as an entrepreneur as much as an attorney to be like, okay, let's start a business. Let's find in your life where you're making income outside of here and find a way to pull that in. Which has actually helped out a ton of people, because what they were doing was, tax fraud in some circumstances, right? Where I was like, you can't just make the income and not report it. That's the stuff they throw you in jail for. I'm okay with you paying a fine. I'll help you if you're like, hey, I'm okay being fined. I'm like, yeah, that's a business decision. I'm not going to help you if you're going to be doing stuff that's going to get you thrown in jail, if this goes wrong into it. So we've helped them be able to say, okay, this is how you can actually legitimately do it while getting all of the benefits that you're looking for, and just make it, where you don't have to live crazy fast and loose. I mean, with smart ideas, there's ways to be able to make all the money that you're looking to make and usually accomplish all the goals you're needing to, especially when I talk to people that are up there in Colorado and California and that good old-fashioned hemp industry. It's like everybody went from slinging weed out of their bedroom to now owning, a legitimate business, but they're trying to run it just like they did before. I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is just insanity. With that. But I've seen a lot of great people, and actually a lot of those contacts actually came from people that I knew that wanted to invest in those businesses with their IRAs and with their 401ks. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's all kinds of great stuff, really cool things that you can do out there, guys, with your tax money. And I know Scott is in Advanced IRA is a great group to work with to be able to do that. So Scott, what we're going to do is we're going to have it inside of the comments for when we push this out to the podcast, as well inside of the Facebook channel and everything they do here. We'll have all the links to you and to their contact information, the website, and everything will be up there. So everybody check out the comments and the notes to this show to be able to pull all that information. If anybody wants to get a hold of you directly and just doesn't have time to check the notes of the show, Scott, what's the best way for them to do that?
Easiest way is just to call me directly. Number is 800-425-0653. My direct extension is 1123. You can also reach out to me on email, which will be in the notes. It's my first initial S and my last name, Maurer, @advantaira.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.